There is a band of women, and to our manor born, emerging from the darkness past and looking toward the morn. Their mothers labored, waited through a night without a star. The morning shows a suffrage flag that bears the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah, hurrah, for the suffrage flag that bears the woman's star.
Hello, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Westside Congregation. We are glad that you are joining us today. I am Laurel Anderson, your service associate. Our speaker today is the Reverend Dr. Nancy Hitt, our consulting minister. Our program today is entitled Finish the Fight, in honor of the book of the same name, written by Veronica Chambers and the staff of the New York Times. With them, we will be honoring the 100th anniversary of the passing of the 19th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and all the women and men who worked so hard to pass it so that women could vote in this country. Stay tuned. I expect you may not have heard this piece of history presented in quite this way before. We plan to have fun while exploring some very serious matters. Our program is also based on our Unitarian principles, specifically number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and number 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. We also cite source number 2, words and deeds of prophetic women and men which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. We hope you will find this service to be engaging, informative, and thought-provoking, and we hope you will let us know what you are thinking later. As always, when we gather, we like to catch up on the news about what is happening at Westside. Here are several announcements for today. At last week's town hall meeting, 19 people were in attendance. With 3 people abstaining, the remainder voted unanimously to pursue offering New Mexico Black the opportunity to hold a rally on our property if that would suit their needs. Any such event would be in compliance with all legal codes, including Governor Lujan Grisham's pandemic protocol. To that end, a letter of invitation has been issued to New Mexico Black. Discussion about safety protocols and other details will occur in response to their reply. Reverend Nancy will keep you informed on this issue. Our Peace River of Painted Rocks is beginning to grow. There is a plastic bin with painting supplies, acrylic paints, and brushes, and a drop cloth under the pergola outside the social hall door. You may visit the church at any time to paint a rock. We have collected a small supply of rocks. You may also bring your own. Please feel free to paint any color or design, including words and poetry, that is in keeping with our principles, and place it in the river bed. Because this is an outdoor activity, you might even enjoy calling a friend and meeting at the church to paint a rock together. Please be sure to maintain the 6-foot social distance and wear a mask with anyone not part of your social bubble or household. We also want to remember that next week, November 1st, we will be collecting donations for Storehouse West. There is a list of what they need for the month of November in this past week's email. If you have deleted yours, either go to storehousewest.org to find it on their website, or let Reverend Nancy know so she can resend it to you. Lastly, a reminder that we have resumed our regularly scheduled committee meetings and classes. Today is the 4th Sunday of October. So the social justice team will be meeting via Zoom at 12:30 p.m. If you did not receive the link and you would like to attend, please notify Reverend Nancy and she will add you to the list. Thank you. It is time now to light our chalice. If you have a personal chalice or candle at home, draw it closer to you now. Please join me in the words that appear on your screen. Free to participate in the world that we live in, people rejoice. Agency, influence, and authority are ours. We vote. May our chalice flame inspire ever new freedoms for all into the future. Shalom and blessed be. Please join me now in affirming our aspirations as the words appear on your screen. Life is a gift. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and mysteries of this great gift. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Shalom.
Sometimes I wish my eyes hadn't been opened. Sometimes I wish I could no longer see all of the pain and the hurt and the longing of my sisters and me as we try to be free. Sometimes I wish my eyes hadn't been opened just for an hour. How sweet it would be not to be struggling, not to be striving, but just sleep securely in our slavery. But now that I've seen with my eyes, I can't close them, because deep inside me, somewhere I'd still know the road that my sisters and I have to travel. My heart would say yes, and my feet would say go. Sometimes I wish my eyes hadn't been opened, but now that they have, I'm determined to see that somehow my sisters and I will be one day the free people we were created to be. That somehow my sisters and I will be one day the free people we were created to be.
Please join me now in sharing our joys and concerns. If you have a personal candle to light at home, draw it closer to you now. I will invite you to light it together with me as I light our final white candle. We begin today with a memorial moment for Robert Gardner. Robert died on October 8th. Many of you are aware that Robert had been in rehab and then hospice care since last February. Despite the pandemic, his wife, Nancy, was able to be with him until the end. Robert had turned 90 in September. He lived a rich and full life. Today we will mark his passing in two ways. We will add this painted rock with the word reality on it to our Peace River in his memory. You may recall that reality was one of Robert's favorite words. We will also light a candle in his memory as I share this poem titled Reality with you. In the beginning, it was, growing slowly and steadily. In every dimension, it unfolded, expanded. In the present moment, it is, pure and solid, ephemeral, ineffable, saturated with itself, complete. Into the future it flows, all-encompassing, creating, destroying, renewing, eternal, unknown. Amen. We light our first candle today for Robert's wife, Nancy, and for all who mourn his absence in their lives. May they find comfort in their memories. We light a candle of joy for the restarting of the Oasis tutoring program as it adapts to new online formats and connects tutors and students in meaningful relationships that help students to read. For Laurel and her student, we hold joy. We light a candle of joy for Bram as she prepares for the pain-relieving surgery that has finally been authorized for her in November. May the process unfold smoothly before her. We light a candle of both hope and concern for the invitation to use our facilities that has been extended to New Mexico Black. We hope they find the resources they need to flourish and to care for their people, whether that is here at Westside or not. We also light a candle of concern for the politics of our nation. May people be safe and responsible in all of their dealings with each other as we approach our national election. We light a candle of joy for the legacy of hope and responsible civic action that enables us to observe the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. May everyone vote this election day. And lastly, we light a final white candle for all the joys and concerns that still fill our hearts and minds. Please join me in lighting yours at home now. It is as a solemn witness that we light our red candle. May it be a witness to the lives of those suffering racial oppression and injustice. May it be a witness to all who fight this human evil. Shalom and amen.
I'm here today with David Kuhn, who moved to New Mexico 3 years ago.
And it's turned out to be great. I really like it here. A little bit warmer than Michigan and Ohio.
For 30 years, David had a career as an attorney.
I practiced patent law.
He spent most of his time working for the U.S. Army at one of their laboratories in Michigan.
We had a lot of really smart people, people with doctorates in physics and lots of smart engineers, and they would invent things. And part of my job was to get patents on things that they invented. And it was a lot of fun for me. I enjoyed seeing all the new technological stuff. It was fun. I enjoyed it, and it was, really great to have all these really smart people, to hang around with.
David has been retired for about 5 years.
It took me 5 years to get used to it. Yeah.
David found the UU Westside congregation about 1.5 years ago. I asked if he had always been a UU.
Oh, no. In fact, just coming to the church that we have was kind of an experiment for me. I mean, I knew what UUs were about, kind of, and I decided to show up and see what it was like. And it was, I just like it there. The people are very nice, very friendly, and philosophically, I fit right in. Well, who doesn't fit in?
I found out that David is a poet. I asked if he would read some of his poetry to us.
The first one I have is called Finding God. Some find God in the petals of a flower, or maybe he lives in a great stone tower. Some find God in the bosoms of men, in their deeds and voices. Amen and amen. Some find God in the thunderclaps, when lightning strikes to kill the asp. Some find God in the stormy sea, in towering waves whose might we flee. Some see God in gray azure mountains, or in rainbows of glistening fountains. Some see God in the grace of a deer, others ponder a forest, and God is near. Or look into the sky, an ocean of blue, feeling God's breath as clouds change hue. Maybe God hammers in a hurricane, where man's poor might seems silly and vain. Does God love us? Is he really around? Pray it is so, for evil does abound. Will we find him if we search evermore? Maybe if we open heart's door.
David's been writing poetry off and on for a long time, ever since he was an undergraduate.
I just had moments where I had just tons of emotion just pouring out of me, and lines of poetry would just sort of form in my brain, and I wrote them down, and so I just kept doing it.
I asked if he would read one more poem to us.
Thoughts about a tree. I see out the window on a winter morn, barren trees, cold and forlorn. Gnarled limbs reach toward the light, roots dig below in endless night. Brown squirrel bounds in a leafless tree, its playful acrobatics wild and free, springing nimbly from branch to limb, its path and purpose guided by whim. Roots below snake into the chill of another domain, dark and still, and silently crawling, worming their way, are sightless creatures, hating light of day. Life above shuns the life below, and neither has the wisdom to know. They're bound together and need each other. Though light and dark, they are brother to brother.
One more thing you may not know about David is that he has a green thumb with houseplants.
I have a big snake plant, and my girlfriend told me that she needed somebody to take care of it. It wasn't doing well in her house, so she gave it to me to take care of, and so it seems to be recuperating. And so I just have a bunch of other plants. I'm not even sure I know all the names of all the plants, but you can see I just have them anywhere there's some light that I've stuck a plant.
He and his girlfriend are looking for a house. He hopes to have even more scope for plants there. We wish him well.
Hello. Did you know that you are not separate from the whole? You are one with the sun, the earth, the air. You don't have a life. You are life. Now this is a little cat named Scat, and it's called Occasionally Things That Seem a Little Bit Fishy Are a Bit Fishy. Occasionally, I'll be given something that looks like a mouse. It's got a little tail and it's fuzzy, but it smells like a piece of felt. What do? I trust my instincts and I brutally kill it. And let's not forget, when I see something wiggling under the covers where my human's toes are they toes or a bug that needs to be bopped with a paw? I know they're toes, but I still do the right thing and give them a bop anyway. Always trust the little voice in your kitty head. You can't let your human's toes think that they own the joint.
Our moment for all ages this morning comes from the Disney musical Mary Poppins. It is the song Sister Suffragette, because even though these are very serious issues, we still have to be able to play with them and laugh at ourselves. And believe me, we are laughing at ourselves. We're clearly soldiers in petticoats, Dauntless crusaders for women's votes. Though we adore men individually, we agree that as a group they're rather stupid. Cast off the shackles of yesterday, shoulder to shoulder into the fray. Our daughters will adore us, as they'll sing in grateful chorus. Well done, well done, well done, Sister Suffragette, Sister Suffragette.
Thank you for your contribution to the financial resources of our congregation. Despite the pandemic, we are able to pay our bills and balance our budget. Thank you for your loyalty and responsibility. As we look forward to 2021, we are experiencing some anxiety. To date, we have received 6 pledge cards for our next year's budget. We cannot run the congregation on 6 contributions. As always, we need everyone. If you have questions on how to make your pledge for the year 2021, please email Dave Kuhn. You may either print out the pledge card from the stewardship email and mail it to P.O. Box 15146 in Rio Rancho, or simply email the information, name, total amount, and how often you would like to make payments to Dave Kuhn Skip at yahoo.com. There are many ways to vote. One way that congregations do it is by pledging to support the budget that keeps us going. It will help a lot if you can get your pledge information in by next Sunday, November 1st. Thank you.
These are the women who throughout the decades have led us and helped us to know where we have come from and where we are going. The women who've helped us to grow. Standing before us, making us strong, lending their wisdom to help us along, sharing a vision, sharing a dream, touching our thoughts, touching our lives like a deep flowing stream. These are the women who joined in the struggle, angry and gentle and wise. These are the women who called us to action, who called us to open our eyes. Standing before us, making us strong, lending their wisdom to help us along, sharing a vision, sharing a dream, touching our thoughts, touching our lives like a deep flowing stream. These are the women who nurtured our spirits, the ones on whom we could depend. These are the women who gave us their courage, our mentors, our sisters, our friends. Standing before us, making us strong, lending their wisdom to help us along, sharing a vision,
May 21st of 1919, the House of Representatives passed the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. On June 4th, the Senate followed suit. On August 18th of 1920, Tennessee became the 36th state to ratify the amendment, thus qualifying it as federal law. It's worth noting that the deciding vote was cast by a man whose mother had written a note telling him to do the right thing. I'm really glad that he did. The amendment was certified on August 26, 1920. In theory, all adult citizens, male and female, have held the right to vote since then. In practice, it has not been that easy. Affirming the full humanity of half the human race seems like a no-brainer for those of us who always lived in a world in which women could vote. But sadly, it wasn't always so, and that fact persists for marginalized people even now. We have to wonder how something consistently labeled as a right has so often been restricted from so many. What does it mean to hold the right to vote? Well, if we go back into the roots of recorded human history, we discover what some of the difficulty is about. The word suffrage simply means voting. It comes from the Latin word suffragium, which means to vote. The Latin word itself is a combination of two words, sub, meaning under, and fagor, meaning crash or din or shouts of approval. If you use your imagination, you can probably picture your ancient forebears gathering to make a decision and shouting loudly in approval to show their support for something. Whatever decision was agreed to under the shouting of approval had been voted on. The first step in the democratic process had been taken. The oldest meaning of these Latin words referred to a series of intercessory prayers or petitions presented to the deity. Right from the start, people came together in groups and loudly proclaimed their opinions about what they needed. Expressing our opinions decisively like that, with an expectation that our participation matters and will bring about a desirable result, is what we know as voting. And although voting started with shouting, it quickly morphed into a variety of forms. Essentially, anything that could be counted or measured could work. So, people shouting or hands raised to receive a blessing from the deity, or small stones or shells, all were used in different times and places. Because always, wherever there were people, there was a need to sort out group living. And out of the shouting of the crowd evolved systems of order, laws, moral codes, ways of identifying people as belonging, or not, to a particular group. We have no written record from the first town hall meeting, but we do have records from a number of ancient cultures that tell us who could vote and when and why. Different kinds of government evolved based, at least in part, on how the people viewed themselves as members of their society. Here are a few words of wisdom from some ancient Greeks about democracy, which is obviously tied to voting, because unless you have a democracy in which some portion of the populace has a say in government, you have no need for voting. Aristotle said that he was a fan of oligarchy, saying that government was best conducted by people with the leisure to practice it. Thucydides supported democracy as long as there was an adept leader at the helm, but otherwise he thought it could be dangerous. Plato felt that although it was nearly impossible to impart political wisdom, everyone, no matter what his trade or level of poverty, could participate in democracy. Aeschines said that government works best if it is ruled by law, not ruled by people. And a fellow named Pseudo-Xenophon, and no, I don't know what we did with the real Xenophon, but Pseudo-Xenophon said that good democracy leads to bad legislation, and good legislation is the forced imposition of will by the more intelligent. Not very big fans of voting, not for everyone anyway, are they? Athens is credited with being the first known democracy in the world. However, only adult male citizens who owned property could vote, which was probably only about 30% of the population. The format of the Athenian democracy is fascinating. They used a lottery system for almost everything to try and keep it fair. But what's important here is that there were already systems of power in place through which decisions got made for the whole society. Democracy, or people power, only came about after a written law code had been developed and aristocratic rulers dethroned. And with those men gone from positions of power and the middle class clamoring for participation in the systems that affected them, a democratic system evolved. But right from the start, voting was viewed as a privilege, not a right. You had to meet the criteria or you didn't get to vote. And when they said you needed to be a resident of Athens, they meant your entire family as far back as it could be traced. Anyone with foreign ancestors was disqualified. You can see that right from the start, people understood that some people are good at being in charge of groups and others are not. And the same was believed to hold true for voting on who could be in charge. One thing they agreed on and passed down through the centuries was the exclusion of women. We see that ethnicity and being female were often exclusionary criteria. Not always. There are other models for human culture in our planet's history, but a large number of influential nations have used some version of discriminatory values to exclude some people and include others when it comes to voting their nation's business. Not only are there many different criteria for voting, there are also many different ways to tally the vote. Over time, people moved from an open shout to a secret ballot. As literacy became the norm, written ballots appeared. One can count the votes and tally for a simple majority, or one can tally for a ranked preference. One can vote for a specific candidate, or one can vote by party. In Germany, the president is chosen by the upper and lower chambers of the legislature voting, not the populace. Ireland elects its president by a simple plurality vote of the public. All of which is to say that in different times and places, different people have had voting rights. I think the only clear qualification that has stood the test of time is that voters had to be adult men. Pretty much everything else is up for grabs. Here in the United States, the first people with voting rights were landowning white men over the age of 18. Women surrendered any independent rights when they married. They could not own property independently, nor claim their children in the event of divorce, nor vote. They and their income, if they had any, were taxed, however, as part of their husband's income. While this was mirrored for European settlers by the culture of their homelands, this was not true of the Native American cultures that they encountered here. The Iroquois Confederacy in the East had women's councils that chose the male leader for the tribe and had the power to affirm or deny the men's declaration of war. In 1848, the first assembly to promote the suffrage of women was held in Seneca Falls, New York, which is in Iroquois territory. Many of the non-native women found inspiring models in their tribal counterparts. One well-known member of the Seneca Wolf clan was Caroline Parker Mount Pleasant. Educated at a missionary school, she spoke excellent English and was well known for her superb beadwork. In 1878, she was publicly named the Peace Queen, a traditional title held by some of her female ancestors. She served as an ambassador back and forth between the two cultures. Other Native American women followed her and worked with the white suffragettes for greater equality for women, particularly for voting privileges. In the late 1850s, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, a black woman, was riding a streetcar in Pennsylvania. The conductor told her that the seats were for white folks. If she wanted to ride, she'd have to stand up with the driver. She refused to get up. When she reached her stop, the conductor refused to accept her money, so she threw it on the floor and left the streetcar. Perhaps Rosa Parks was channeling her 100 years later in 1955. Black women have worked for suffrage right from the start of the movement. In 1912, Mabel Ping Hua Li was 16 years old. Her family were Chinese immigrants. Her father was a minister at the First Chinese Baptist Church in New York City. Mabel was well educated and bilingual. She encouraged her mother to join her in her suffrage work, which outraged the newspapers. That the minister's wife would work for women's suffrage was outrageous. Mabel led her mother and a contingent of Chinese American women in one of the biggest suffrage parades in U.S. history. She did this knowing that as a Chinese immigrant, she would not be allowed to vote even if women were granted voting rights due to the Exclusion Act of 1882, which denied Chinese immigrants citizenship. The New York Times reported that her contingent of women were 10,000 strong, a parade like none New York City had ever seen before. And Mabel didn't just lead the parade at age 16. She did it riding on a white horse wearing the colors of the suffrage movement. You can see them here in our flowers on our altar table. White for purity, purple for nobility of purpose, and gold and yellow for hope, chosen because the sunflower is the state flower of Kansas, where some of the first suffrage assemblies had been held by Susan B. Anthony. In 1914, the Mexican Revolution was in full swing. Texas, while then part of the United States, had previously been part of Mexico. When the war broke out, many Mexicans fled to Texas for safety. Racial tension was high when an editorial in the local paper was published that criticized President Woodrow Wilson for sending troops to Mexico. A contingent of Texas Rangers arrived to shut the newspaper down, only to be stopped in their tracks by a woman blocking the doorway. Jovita Idar, a highly respected Mexican woman of the community, would not move. The Rangers left and snuck back the next day when Jovita wasn't there. But that didn't stop her. She and her brother started another newspaper for which she bought the printing press herself. And she continued to write articles demanding better schools, more economic opportunities, and fairer treatment for Mexican Americans, including for women and the right to vote. She and her family were journalists and activists. She helped found the first Mexicanist Congress that led to the formation of the League of Mexican Women, probably the first Mexican-American feminist organization in the country. Native, Mexican, Asian, Black, white, women of every ethnic possibility worked for 50 years or more to win the right to vote. As Stacy reminded us last week, women were arrested and imprisoned, force-fed and institutionalized in mental hospitals for insisting on the right to vote. They were beaten and locked up. Their reputations were shredded. Their families renounced them. They were the objects of ridicule and harassment. They were spit upon in public and reviled in the press and from the pulpit. They were damned to hell for their unnatural insistence on gaining the right to vote. And they did it. They won. The 19th Amendment guarantees male and female, all citizens, regardless of sex, the right to vote. Now, I wish I could end right here with a rousing chorus celebrating their success, but we can't. Even with the 19th Amendment certified as law by 1920, it took the Civil Rights Act to clear the way to the polls for blacks in our country. And there is still more legislation than I can name in the time we have here that either seeks to put obstacles in people's paths or remove them so they can vote. Things like redefining voting districts, malfunctioning ballots and counting machines, requiring literacy tests or picture IDs, or IDs with the person's home address on them. Some of that sounds okay at first hearing, until you realize who doesn't have access to those things. Did you know that there are U.S. citizens who don't live in the U.S., who have no picture ID with a U.S. address? Should members of the armed forces serving overseas not vote? Should you have to pass a test about the U.S. Constitution before you can vote? Most landowning white men over the age of 18 could not pass that. Why can't every adult vote? Did you know that in a variety of states in our history, it wasn't even required that a person be a citizen to vote? Look it up. What do our voting practices say about us as a nation? What do we stand for? Who do we exclude? What are we afraid of? Who do we protect? Whose voice can we not bear to listen to? How hard is it to be human without the protection of rank or privilege? What would it be like if we really practiced equality and everyone voted? The suffragettes of the 18 and 1900s fought long and hard to be accepted as fully functional human beings with the same right to represent themselves and their concerns that men had. They fought hard and long, and they won. They won big. We need to celebrate the victory, to use it, to get out and vote. Male and female, we need to learn from their example. And we need to keep on going. We need to finish the fight. We need to monitor ourselves and make sure that everyone who has the right to vote has the means to exercise that right. With rights come responsibilities. Rights are more than just a way to get what we want. Rights are a way to build a world characterized by justice, equity, and compassion. Making sure that happens is our responsibility. Like our suffragist sisters of old, we need to commit to the battle until every adult person has the freedom to exercise their rights without fear or reprisal. This 100th anniversary is a glorious occasion. Let the momentum carry you forward to the polls for our upcoming national election. Exercise your right to vote, and more. In the spirit of our sister suffragettes, let's finish the fight. Keep on fighting till all people share all rights equally, and justice and compassion are the law of our land. Shalom and amen. Now, we would really appreciate hearing your response to this program. We'd like to know what captured your interest and how it made you feel. We'd like to know what features work well for you on the video and what doesn't. Please leave your comments either on our services webpage or our Facebook page, or you may email me directly. Thank you. Please join me in speaking these words together as we extinguish our chalices, both here and at home. The torch has been passed. We receive it with joy. We hold it in our hearts with gratitude. We pledge to live by its light to change our world. Shalom and amen. May you be inspired to change the world, to expand the realm of justice till no one lives outside it. May the transforming power of love fuel your life. Shalom and amen.
We'll have a perfect nation, we'll march from near and far, to glory 'neath the stars and stripes that shall bear the woman's star. Hurrah, hurrah, for equal rights, hurrah, hurrah, for the stars and stripes that shall bear the woman's star.